Hey, so welcome to Mission Log. Normally, by the way, I'm John, and you guys get to introduce yourselves this time.
Ah, well, take it away, Norman.
Hi, I'm Norman Lau, and this is my real mustache. Just want to let you know, not a fake.
I'm Rod Roddenberry, and this is my real hair. Normally, it's a lot shorter, but because of things, I've let it go a little crazy. So we're just having some
Uh,
fun. We'll see. Next time you see me, it might be all shaved off. Who knows?
that's why I like these virtual backgrounds because they tend to soften the resolution, the details, so you don't look quite, people can't tell like, wow, your hair's a mess.
Have you seen that filter on Zoom? That it's there's a touch up button you can push
Oh no, no way.
in your
Yeah.
preferences under video. There's
Okay.
touch. I think it's called touch up. And I think it does exactly what you said. I think it just smooths things, blurs things just a bit.
Okay.
So God
Fair
forbid
enough.
you have a little blemish or zit. It in theory
Right.
won't look as bad.
I would never imagine having a
Not much
blemish
you could do for
before I
this,
go
but
on.
yeah.
No, you look fine.
It technically DNRs your face, John. It
Yeah, you're
DNRs
right.
like the
That's
resolution.
that's what I need. Yeah. Hey, look. So there's a few things to talk about tonight, and this little slice of video is what you would normally get if you're part of our Patreon supporters, our Patreon group. So those of you who are on Patreon, you're getting this twice, but we wanted to release this part with Rod uh, widely. We'll throw it up on Facebook for everybody because we didn't do a show this week. Well, we did a show, but we didn't release a show this week, and everything started to kind of happen late Monday and certainly into Tuesday morning. A lot of podcasts and a lot of social media content creators decided to take a day off, and that
Mhm.
honestly turned into the week off. Um, and Norman, you can talk to me about it. You texted me, I guess, early Tuesday, and
Mhm.
just said, "Hey, what's the plan? What are we going to do here?" What were you thinking? What were your thoughts?
Well, I've been pretty active on social media about my feelings toward what is happening. Post the George Floyd murder. I
Mhm.
say murder because that's what it was, and it really just got me into thinking. What is the social complexity out there in the fabric? And there are a lot of people that were doing this in support as they could because maybe they just didn't have another outlet for support. So I find the decision that we made to not publish this week in support of other media that weren't publishing this week. And I think it's our version of kind of taking a knee in solidarity with what's happening and the injustices that are being cried out for across the world regarding what happened with George Floyd and the systemic racism that's happening across not just politics, but in the police force for the people that are supposed to be serving and protecting us.
Yeah. And I like that you brought that up, and I like that we got to have that conversation. Honestly, I was kind of two minds about it. Not that I didn't want to make a statement or show solidarity, but I felt like, and even doing this tonight with you guys, it just felt like, okay, look, we are not experts. We do not have special insight into what's going on. We can only speak as ourselves. I would feel a little weird putting a show out on Thursday that say, hey, let's talk about Star Trek, when there are just other things that need to be talked about right now. And I think part of that idea to go silent on social media for at least a little while was just to say, there are other things that need to be talked about. There are probably other sites, other people you need to be following right now. And us making some jokes and then waxing poetic about the latest episode of DS9 that we watched. Yeah, it's not to say that it's not political sometimes, but it just seemed like I didn't want to do that sort of regular weekly cycle of promoting us, promoting the show, and then getting into those conversations. There just seems like there needed to be other conversations that needed to be had. Um, Rod, I'm sorry, Norman and I have just been talking about the
No, no.
decision to not do a show or not release a show, and kind of wrap our heads around that part of it. But let's talk about what's going on. I mean, we've been addressing on the live show every now and then, the pandemic situation, which has
Mhm.
thrown the whole world for a loop. And now we're in this other thing on top of it, which is socially, politically, morally incredibly relevant. What's on your mind, man?
Yeah, no, it's just listening to you guys talk and taking a moment to reflect right now. Just the first thought I had was sort of the bubble that I live in, that we all live in.
Mm.
You know, the three of us and many fans out there and everyone. I mean, coming at this from Roddenberry Star Trek, which is the semi-unique perspective I think I can bring to it. It's that idea of a beautiful future, a better future, where we all love diversity and crave and thirst for diversity in thought, in physical form, and everything. And this is why I love Star Trek. It's not the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. It's not necessarily the episodes or the shows themselves. It's really the philosophy. That's what connected me to my father. That's what made me proud to have the last name Roddenberry, because all the people who came up to me, as you guys have heard before, and told me their stories of how Star Trek inspired them to believe in themselves, believe in the planet, believe in a better future. And then it's, you know, something like this happens. And, you know, we go along our days in our bubbles, and I'm a very fortunate person. And while I won't say I'm oblivious at all to what's going on in the real world, I don't spend every waking moment thinking of the atrocities that are happening around the world, let alone in our backyard. And then something like this happens, and it's really, you know, put in your face. Obviously, these things are happening here today now in my backyard in Los Angeles. And I keep wanting to think that Star Trek, well, with or without Star Trek, but obviously with Star Trek, we've made some progress. We've taken some steps forward, and I do think we have. I just get a little bummed out that it's not as progressive as I thought. We are not as progressive as I would hope we'd be by now. We haven't moved as far forward as we have. And listen, that might be a little bit unfair. I think on some level we have, and I don't have the degree to go back and cite what it was like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s versus what it's like now. But there are obviously a lot of parallels. There's obviously a lot of bigotry and racism right now. There's essentially, I don't want to say riots because that's a charged word, but there are passionate protesters out there. There's confrontations, and it's about racism, and it's just a little. To say it's a little disheartening is not enough, but to say it's horrific is I don't know. Well, maybe it is horrific, I guess. But it's just sort of reflecting on this and knowing that I live in my world, and I see things a certain way, and I see day to day, and I go about my day to day, and it touches on business and personal life and everything that we all have to deal with. And with our foundation, we do stuff in social justice. But I am not steeped in that every day. So I can't claim to be one of the frontliners out there knowledgeable about everything that's really going on. And so I guess this is to say it's a twisting in the stomach. You know, it's sort of like disheartening. And I want to be positive. I want to be the Roddenberry and say, but it only gets better. And I can do that. This is an experience we are going to learn from. And terrible things have happened and will happen. I know it seems heartless to just say it in such a unemotional way, but standing back and looking at it, this is how we learn as a species. These sorts of things have to happen. And change has to come from these things. And that's what people are calling for, is change. Granted, there's a lot of different ideas out there, how to change the police force and restructure it and all sorts of ideas. I don't know what the right one is. But this can't be ignored, bottom line, right? I think we all agree, it can't be ignored. Changes have to be made. I just feel helpless because I wish I had a solid feeling like we should do this. I could say we should not be racist. That's easy. But I just don't even understand the concept of racism still. It just seems like such an archaic concept that you look different, so I think you're less. I don't get it.
I think you said something well, you said a lot of things that are really important. And one that I really identified with is that there's sort of this feeling of helplessness in one respect. Like, I can't wrap my head around all of the problems, and I
Yeah,
certainly can't wrap my head around all of the solutions.
yeah,
And I feel like a lot of the escalation of what's going on has also been like, you're concerned about this in the wrong way. Or
yeah,
you're expressing your outrage or your need to do something in the wrong way. You need to express it this way. And I'm just like,
yeah,
I'm just a guy behind a mic. And I'm really proud of Trekkies Together, and that I didn't put it together. Anthony from Trek Movie and a lot of other podcasters and bloggers kind of came together just to be able to do something. And
yeah,
if the thing you can do is slap down a credit card and give a few bucks to an institution that is doing something right, cool. Then do
yeah,
that too. But it has become, I found myself vacillating between being incredibly disheartened. I can walk 2.5 blocks down the street and just see a row of smashed stores and restaurants and places that you or I have walked 100 times. So I go from that to being worried to being frustrated that again, there's no one right path. And then you get met with antagonism even when you're trying to do what is right.
yeah.
um,
Go ahead.
you
I'll
know,
let you.
no, but then you brought up something else that resonated with me, which is being hopeful here. And I think out of all of this has happened. I mean, look, I'm grateful that it's 7:30 on a Friday night in LA and it's quiet. And I know that there are more marches and protests to come, and that's good. And it gives me hope that those voices get louder and louder and louder.
Yeah,
And we all start to process like, oh, this is for real and this needs to happen. And yeah, these history changing moments aren't just solely left to history. They don't stop in 1968.
yeah.
They actually still have relevance and resonance and importance today.
At some point, Norman, I want to let you jump in here, but I mean, at some point, I really just want to talk about. Well, okay, I guess I'm doing it because I can't stop myself. We seem to be such a reactionary society. I mean, everything from the internet. We've been dealing with this for I guess 2-3 decades now, perhaps even longer if someone can look back further. There seems to be so much emotion, clearly and understandably, in these issues, that everyone is reacting, and it just seems. And forgive me, not everyone. The majority of protests are peaceful. There are a lot of cool, calm, and collected people out there looking at both sides. I'm just saying, of course, what we hear about on the news, which that's a whole nother thing. News isn't doing this any favors. But the reactionary response that you've been getting, that I don't know if you've both been getting,
Mm-hmm.
just try to have some empathy. And I know that's really hard to do. And sometimes I lose my temper, and it's okay that we make a mistake, but we should always be trying to have empathy and understanding. You've got one person saying Black Lives Matter and another one's all lives matter, and this back and forth. They're both saying something very good. I mean, neither one is wrong. Black lives 100% matter, and every life 100% matters. And just, I guess, understand that the ideas of Black Lives Matter right now is important, because that is a message that needs to be said, because there are people who do not understand it and do not hear it. So right now, that needs to be said, and I respect everyone's right to say it, and wholeheartedly agree with it. Do all lives matter? Of course all lives matter. It's just, you don't need to fight about it. Right now, the situation is a man was killed. He was murdered by a police officer. An African-American man was killed by a white police officer. I understand why Black Lives Matter, and they do matter 100%. It's just, and now you put something out there and you have a point of view and everyone just wants to jump on it and everyone just wants to pull it apart and be upset and angry. And again, everyone has a right to be angry, but we're not going to make any progress if we don't take a moment to just stop and think about not just what the other person is saying it, but why they're saying it. Yeah. And try to empathize, understand their perspective, how close they are to it, ask them a question, get some background, and then have a discussion. But just the arguing, the fighting, the anger, the hostility, that is counterproductive. And again, I know a majority of people are cool, calm, and collected, and the protests are peaceful, and that is great. And I want that to continue. But that's what feels frustrating to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry that everyone has to deal with that when they're out there just trying to say something good, just trying to be hopeful.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Rod, the interesting thing about the dialogue that's going on with social media and what people don't, I think, take personal responsibility for is that I've been watching this show on Netflix called Community, and it's a comedy, mm-hmm. but there was this one scene I thought was really, really just so perfectly illustrated. One of the characters, the main character there, Joel McHale's Jeff Winger, he's talking about the law and he's talking about what the truth is. And he basically just writes this diagram on the chalkboard and he says truth, puts a circle around it. And he says that this is the reason why people argue. It's not the truth. It's the truth of what they believe in. And they don't listen to the other side of the story because they're too busy trying to defend their own truth.
Yeah.
The truth in and of itself is the victim. And I'm going to quote my favorite show, Babylon 5, where one character said, there are 3 sides to every story: your side, their side, and the truth. Too many people, I can't, take credit for that. That's J. Michael Straczynski, but too many people believe what the truth is versus what the actual truth is unexplored. And the only way that you can do that is through education. You have to educate yourself as opposed to choosing one or the other banners of polarization that make you react as opposed to understanding why you're reacting.
And can I say the first thing before all that, I'll let you finish, is people have to get comfortable with saying, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's not weakness, guys. Anyone out there who looks at you and says not knowing is a sign of weakness, they're wrong. Not knowing is how you learn. It's okay to not know. Yeah. And so if you don't know the truth, or you don't know the other side of the situation, or you don't know what the other person is thinking, which most of us don't, listen. Sorry, I think that's the first step, and then you get educated.
Exactly. So you have to talk. You have to create these dialogues and say, I understand. People say that I understand what you're saying, but they don't, because they use that phrase, I understand what you're saying, to predicate what you're going to say, what they're going to say, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just a way to diffuse or placate somebody who's speaking their opinion and not listening, and then you speaking your opinion and not listening. You're not coming from a point of an educated center.
Question for you. How much of that, based on what you just said, I also feel like when we get very emotional about something, our blinders go up, and it's hard for the logic, I don't know, the logic receptors in our brain, I don't think that's a real thing, to start working. And you just react with emotion and passion, and you don't hear, you don't learn. Is that?
Well, I mean, it's fair to say, but to quote Spock in Star Trek 6 when he was talking to Valeris, logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. Mm-hmm. So logic doesn't necessarily have to be dispassionate. Logic is the base of being an educated person. So sure. If you understand the points of both sides, then you can start negotiating both emotionally and logically and factually and understanding. If you only know your side, that's the only side that you're going to defend, because there is no empathy for the other side. There's no respect for the other side. And once you do that, those walls become dogma. And when you when you strictly adhere to dogma, that's
Yeah.
when the conversation is lost, because all you're doing is protecting and trying to win as opposed to trying to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. I want to move on just a little bit, just to recognize some people that I've been talking to. Some of our listeners have written in and have been talking about watching stuff that inspires them and reading stuff that inspires them. And I do want to point out that geekunifiedtheory.com has a great article comparing DS9's past tense and the Bell riots to what's happening now. Go take a look at that. Somebody mentioned that because they were talking about our show, the Mission Log episode on past tense, which did some months ago. My friend Ernie, he texted me when this was getting going, and he was like, "John, help me. I need what is an inspiring, what is a Star Trek episode that's got a speech that I can hang on to, a phrase, anything that I can watch." And I was like, "Man, I don't know. Is it too on the nose to hear Picard at the end of the neutral zone, or not at the end, but actually in the middle, telling these unfrozen 20th century relics that look, we're beyond that. We get is that inspiring enough to hear him say that we've outgrown these petty needs?" And he wrote me back and he said, no, I'm going for a taste of Armageddon. I need to hear Kirk say that I'm a barbarian, but I can choose not to kill today. I was like, all right, good choice, man.
Yeah.
Good choice. Scott Palm wrote to me. He said, he was watching Balance of Terror, Take Me Out to the Hollow Suite, among many others, looking for some escapism as well.
John, can I interrupt you with Balance of Terror? Because Balance of Terror has a very interesting line in it. You know the line I'm talking about.
I think I do. Go ahead. Yeah.
So there's a character there by the name of Lieutenant Stiles, and he's the navigator at this time. This is before Walter Koenig comes on. And he said something underneath his breath, and then Kirk says, there's no room for bigotry on my bridge.
Right. Yes.
But the real subtext to what's being said is that there is bigotry still in the 23rd century. Because when Kirk, or at least when Stiles acts out on it towards Spock, Kirk recognizes it and he says, it's not suitable. Take it off of my bridge. But the fact remains that Stiles is still a bigot.
Yeah.
In the 23rd century, in Rod, in your father's show. Yeah. I think that's a very important point to make, because Kirk is fighting for one side. It's just that the other side still exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's why I like Kirk Next Generation a little bit more.
But good for Kirk.
I'd like to think that we're beyond it at that point. But it can't be completely all gone, sadly.
Yeah. But what happens to Stiles later? It's like, does he get called down on it, and does he learn from it and go, oh,
does he learn from it? Yeah.
I acted out of line. I was presented with new information that I didn't process it the right way. So now I get to learn from this and be a better bridge officer. And that's why we saw Stiles so much more after that episode.
Right? I can name every episode on my not hand after that.
Exactly. Exactly. We got an email from Scott Holmstrom, who has been in touch with us quite a bit lately. And he asked me if we could give a shout out to something very specific. And I'm happy to do it, because it says something about, there's so much toll to what is going on right now. And this one hit particularly close to him. He said, I was hoping you could do a shout out to Uncle Hugo's Sci-Fi Bookstore, operating in Minneapolis since 1974, making it the oldest still operating sci-fi bookstore in the country until today. Sadly, among many, many other businesses, it was burned down very early this morning, along with its sister store, Uncle Edgar's Mystery Bookstore. Uncle Hugo's was my childhood. I bought my copy of Peter Davidson's Zadi there. I bought my first D&D book there. I bought my first pack of dice there. That store had books that predated its founding, and its staff are the geekiest of geeks. They specialize in carrying hard to find and out of print books. They had old copies of Analog and other sci-fi periodicals, original and signed copies of many writers, etc. It was family owned and took a lot of pride in their collection and assortment. Under COVID, they had only just reopened on the 18th of May, and now it's just gone. And he sent me a link to unclehugo.com, www.unclehugo.com. I know that everybody is being asked a lot. And for those of you who have donated, or you have been out there on the streets, or you have been making your voice heard in any other way, like I said earlier in this show, there is no wrong way to be concerned about what's going on. The fact that you're concerned about what's going on is great. Scott has a particular personal interest in this, and also as a guy who grew up with a couple of great sci-fi nerd stores close to me, Scott, I understand your pain. So unclehugo.com, if you want to check that out, they have put up some fundraising there to hopefully recover from this. So with that said, I wanted to talk about what we can do. You know, I mentioned earlier Trekkies Together, which you can find on Twitter and on, it's a hashtag, by the way, on Twitter and on Facebook. And that will lead you back to the article that Trek Movie did. And this was all actually kind of drummed up on a subreddit, the Star Trek subreddit, of people saying, wouldn't it be great if we all gave $47? Not total. Individually, each of us gave $47 to the ACLU or to any number of places that are concerned about social justice and fighting injustice. On the Mission Log Facebook page, I specifically put a link to the ACLU. If you click that button, great. It's not about that particular button. If you go through the subreddit and find the others, great. Women at Warp had already started giving to another organization. If you want to follow them, great. The whole idea is, you know, I said to myself the other day, like I said, I've been torn between hearing noise and chaos outside my window and not fearing for my personal safety. I have felt perfectly safe here. Like, my mom and dad are watching. I have felt perfectly safe here. But it's concerning that down the street, you know, there are businesses that I can't go into, places that are part of the neighborhood that I can't go into, and that concerns me. That worries me a lot. And I don't want to be a guy who just sits here on my couch and sort of rides this out. So I'm trying to find ways to be involved in this, and there are many, many ways. That happens to be one. So that was one that I felt really good about, and particularly sharing with the Mission Log community and the Star Trek community at large, which was find somebody who is also doing the work, who is also fighting the fight. Do what you can. 47 is a great number. We can all appreciate that and get behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Supporting those organizations is huge. And you know, I really, this isn't about self-promotion or anything. The Roddenberry Foundation is something we started back in 2010. And initially, we really started focusing on technologies and methodologies to make the world a better place, to make it sort of that Star Trek future. But in the last, I'd say, 5 years plus, our CEO, Lior Ip, and of course the board, we've come together and you know, since our last election, I'll just say, we've looked towards social justice and what we can do to support the individuals and people out there that are trying to make positive change. And so we have a program called the Fellowship. And if you go to roddenberryfoundation.org and check out Fellowship at the top there, you can learn a little bit about what we're doing. And it's not that we're doing it. We're supporting people who are doing it. We're supporting the individuals out there that are working in their communities, whether it's a city, a town, whatever, to work with immigration, to do racism, sexism. They're incredible people who have taken these things on themselves and really, through passion, because they want to make the world a better place, have been doing what they can. So we've supported them with money. We've supported them with a program. We've supported them with speakers and people help them to learn how to better spread their message. We're inspired by them. And if you go to the site, you can read some of the stories. It's amazing how many people out there really believe in that future. Mm-hmm. So please check that out.
Good. I don't have too much more to add to this. I felt it was, like I said, I felt it was necessary for the three of us to talk and to talk to our audience. I also felt way out of my league here.
Yeah,
Again, we're nerds who talk about Star Trek. Honestly, that's what we do. But I feel a camaraderie with our audience. We're engaged in this conversation week after week for years now, and like I said, we don't have a special insight here, but we're part of the conversation. So we wanted to chat with you and kind of check in with you this way. Let you know why you didn't get a show this week, which we try rarely to ever not have a show out. But Norman, you said, hey, do we need to take a mental health day here? And I think we did, and I'm glad that we did.
Should take more than that.
I mean, I think in the realm of what we can do, some people feel that they're voiceless and powerless, and I think that's how a lot of how the system has trained you to think, that you don't have a voice, that you don't have power, that you don't have influence, that your vote doesn't matter. And once you start believing that, it becomes true. And once more people become indoctrinated with that kind of belief, it becomes even more true. So that's the spiral of conversation that people have. Oh, why bother voting? Nothing changes. Oh, why bother making a difference? Nothing changes. It does make a difference. Your thoughts make a difference. Your voice makes a difference. And if you can't physically go out and protest, then find a way to support the protest. But if you can go out and protest and you can't financially help more than that, then that's what you do. There isn't one way of doing this the right way. But if you don't do it, you're not making any change at all. So you have to find what's comfortable for you. If you can do it all, that's great. But once you resolve yourself to not making a choice, that's the choice that you have made.
Well, and just put a little button on that. Try shifting your perspective, because you may feel like just you, the one person, can't do anything. But to be honest, that's true. You can't change the problem alone yourself. The thing is, you're not doing it alone. You're doing it with, if we're talking about the Star Trek community, you're doing it with all the other Trekkies out there. Granted, there's so many more than just Trekkies out there. But we all understand this idea that it's not just the one of us, it's the group of us. If we all work together, we can make significant change. And if we're all, whether it's protesting, donating, simply online, listening, sharing your thoughts, but listening as well, that is making a change. Talking to your children, talking to your friends, but doing all of this with empathy. I hate to, well, no, I don't hate to sound like a hippie. Do it with empathy and unconditional love. Not always easy to do. It is a charged environment. These are charged conversations. They're heated, they're passionate. But if you just take that moment to breathe and hear, again, not just what they're saying, but why they're saying it, and respond with empathy and love, I mean, that's going to send a strong message as well. And I'm not just preaching this like I do it all the time. I don't do it all the time. I'm saying it for my own self to hear myself say again. So hopefully the next time I'm in one of these discussions, I can stop, chill the frank out, and say, okay, hold on. I get it. This person's hurting. This person is angry. This person, whatever. What can I do? Can I listen more? Can I hug them? Can I do something? I mean, I don't want to be that cheesy, but maybe that'll work. Guys, now's the time to bring back being the hippie. Unconditional love is the only way we're going to get through this. So that's, Rod the hippie, that's fine. Although I still hate that episode of the original series.
No, don't you dare. The Way to Eden?
Yeah.
I will take you on. I will fight you.
Yeah.
They had a good message, though. They had a good message.
Yeah, don't be disrespecting Charles Napier. Right?
No. Guys, well, first of all, I'm glad we could end it with a laugh, but thank you both so much. Rod, thank you so much for a
No,
little
thanks
bit
for
of your
having me. I
time.
didn't have much to say except, that's what I said.
Well, look, that's the whole point is you don't have to. You don't
Yeah.
have to have the exact right words. You don't have to have the exact perfect insight. The point is we're talking, we're sharing our concerns. That's all I want people to get out of this is that, we're here for you guys. You're there for us. We're all thinking about what's happening in the world today. We're all concerned. And we're going to keep having conversations, hopefully. And we're going to try to do what we can. So, again, like Rod said, if you're marching, march. If you're donating, donate. If you're looking for other ways to participate, do that. Have the conversation. Have it with an open heart and an open mind.
Yeah.
So,
and it's okay not to know what to do.
Yeah, for real. I go through most of my life that way.
Likewise.
Except for when we do the shows. When we do the shows, you're on point.
So, all right, I'll be on point. So that's it. We're going to cut it here. Rod will say goodbye to you, and then Norman and we're going to do a show.
All right.
All right, man.
Love everyone.
Take
Idic
care.
forever.
All right. Have a good night.